Stop celebrating our survival and start dismantling what made it necessary. Welcome to Soft Girl Era, the sacred pause Black women have been waiting for. I'm your host, LeAnne Dolce, pronounced Dolce, like sweet softness whispered in French. I'm your guide from burnout to boundaries, from doing to being, from strong to soft, and loving every second of it. Today, I want to share something with you that shook me to my core, something that forced me to confront a truth I'd been avoiding. I recently had the privilege of sitting down with Aisha Hodge, a woman who is not just witnessing the seismic shifts happening in our workforce, but who is actively working to dismantle the barriers that keep Black women trapped in cycles of survival. Aisha Hodge is a force, a truth teller, and someone who refuses to let us celebrate resilience without also demanding justice. Her work is making the world better, one uncomfortable conversation at a time. She's not here for applause. She's here for accountability. And what she shared with me, that what we unpacked together, is something I need you to hear because it's not just about statistics or policy. It's about us. It's about the women in this room listening right now who have been told that if they just work harder, lean in more, show up earlier, stay later, that success will follow. It's about the lie we've been sold that our survival is simply a matter of personal grit. Here's what Aisha helped me see: the current wave of job losses among Black women, over 300,000 jobs lost, is not the result of market forces or individual choices. It is a direct consequence of systemic disinvestment and policy rollbacks that have specifically targeted sectors where Black women are overrepresented: public service, nonprofits, care work, the very places where we have historically sought stability, dignity, and the opportunity to serve are the places being gutted. This is not just an economic issue. This is a reflection of how deeply ingrained inequities can suddenly erase decades of the hard won progress. Let me say that again: decades of progress erased. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. You might be thinking, well, the economy is tough for everyone right now. People lose jobs. That's just how it goes. But here's the thing: when we look closer, when we stop accepting surface level explanations and start asking who is being impacted and why, a different picture emerges, a picture that demands we see this crisis not as inevitable, but as orchestrated. Let me take you into what happened in early 2025. A wave of federal workforce cuts swept through government agencies, resulting in the loss of nearly 83,000 federal jobs. Now, Black women make up 18% of the federal workforce. 18%. And when those cuts came, they didn't fall evenly. They fell hardest on the women who had spent years, sometimes decades, building careers in public service. Women who believed that if they showed up with excellence, if they served with integrity, they would be protected. They weren't. Picture this: a woman who's been with her agency for 15 years. She's climbed the ladder slowly, carefully, navigating bias at every rung. She's mentored younger colleagues. She stayed late to finish reports no one else wanted to touch. She's made herself indispensable. And then one morning, she gets an email: budget cuts, position eliminated, effective immediately, no severance package, no transition plan. Just thank you for your service. These women faced sudden unemployment. They lost stability. They lost the promise of advancement. And what did they do? They leaned on professional networks. They leaned on community support. They leaned on faith. Some pursued retraining. Some transitioned to entrepreneurship, not because they wanted to pivot, but because they had to regain control over their careers in a system that had abandoned them. And here's what's stunning: 59% of those impacted started businesses or freelance work. 52% switched industries entirely. 30% retrained or returned to school. Let that sink in. In the face of systemic abandonment, Black women adapted. They innovated. They rebuilt. But here's the question Ayesha posed to me, and I'm posing it to you now. Why are we celebrating that resilience without also confronting the conditions that made it necessary? Because while we were watching federal jobs disappear, something else was happening in the private sector. In the spring of 2025, companies began quietly dismantling their diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. The same DEI programs that had been championed loudly, publicly, in the wake of 2020's racial justice movement. The same programs that had given Black women, finally, a seat at tables where decisions were being made. Those programs were being gutted. And the women who had led them, who had staffed them, who had poured their expertise and their hope into building more equitable workplaces were being shown the door. Let me paint you another picture. Imagine a Black woman who spent 3 years building a DEI program from scratch. She designed training modules, she facilitated difficult conversations, she collected data, presented findings, pushed leadership to make real changes. She believed in the mission. She believed the company believed in it too. Then the political winds shifted, and suddenly DEI became a liability, a risk, something to quietly phase out. So they called her into a meeting, told her the department was being restructured. Her role was no longer aligned with company priorities. They thanked her for her contributions, and then they escorted her out. Mass layoffs in DEI roles, abrupt terminations, no support, no clear pathways forward. Just thank you for your service. We're moving in a different direction now. And what did these women do? They turned to entrepreneurship. They sought roles in new industries. They used their skills in advocacy, leadership, and community organizing to build new professional identities. They launched consulting firms. They started advocacy groups. They created community programs. They continued to drive impact, but now outside the structures that had failed them. This is not a story about corporate benevolence. This is a story about corporate abandonment. And it's a story about Black women refusing to disappear. But there's more. Because while federal jobs were being cut and corporate DEI roles were being eliminated, Black women working in small businesses and nonprofits were also being hit hard. Economic contraction, reduced government grants, widespread layoffs. These are sectors where Black women are overrepresented. These are sectors where we have historically filled essential roles in community based organizations, in care work, in the places that hold our communities together when everything else is falling apart. Think about the nonprofit director who's been running a youth mentorship program for 10 years. She's stretched every dollar, she's written grant after grant, she's kept the lights on through sheer will. And then the grants dry up, the government funding disappears, and she has to make a choice: lay off her staff, close the doors, or figure out how to keep going with nothing. And when funding dried up, when grants were slashed, when budgets were cut, Black women faced job loss, financial instability, and barriers in reentering the workforce. Barriers like discrimination, barriers like AI driven resume screening that filters out names, zip codes, gaps in employment, barriers that are invisible to those who don't face them, but devastatingly real to those who do. Some of these women started their own businesses. Some relied on personal networks and community based organizations for support and retraining opportunities. The surge in Black women entrepreneurs highlighted both the lack of safety nets and the drive for self determination in the face of adversity. Now, I want to pause here because I need you to see what Ayesha helped me see. This is not a story about individual failure. This is not a story about women who didn't work hard enough, didn't plan well enough, didn't adapt fast enough. This is a story about systemic forces, policy shifts, cuts to public sector jobs, the retreat from corporate DEI commitments that disproportionately impact Black women. And yet, despite these challenges, despite being targeted by policies and abandoned by institutions, Black women are demonstrating remarkable resilience and adaptability. They are pivoting to entrepreneurship. They are retraining. They are shifting industries, not out of luxury, but out of necessity. And here's what Aisha wants us to understand: this resilience, this adaptability, it highlights both their strength and the urgent need for systemic change. Because without targeted action, the wage gap will persist. The barriers to advancement will persist. And they will persist not just for this generation, but for generations to come, impacting not just individuals, but entire communities and the broader economy. So let me bring this back to us, to this room, to the women listening right now who are in their soft girl era, who are learning to be soft in a world that taught them survival. Because here's the connection: the same systems that are cutting jobs, dismantling DEI programs, slashing funding for nonprofits are the same systems that taught us we had to be strong all the time. That taught us we couldn't rest. That taught us softness was weakness. We were told to put on the cape, to be the superwoman, to lead teams, raise families, hold down households, carry communities. And we did. We did it all. And now we're exhausted. And we're being told implicitly, explicitly, that our exhaustion is our fault. That if we had just worked harder, been more strategic, been more resilient, we wouldn't be in this position. But Aisha is here to tell us, and I'm here to tell you, that is a lie. The crisis facing Black women in the workforce is not a crisis of individual failure. It is a crisis of systemic disinvestment. And addressing this crisis requires more than individual perseverance. It demands collective advocacy and structural reform. So here's what I want to leave you with today. Here's the question Aisha posed to me, and I'm posing it to you. How can each of us, whether as business leaders, policymakers, or community members, move beyond celebrating resilience to actively dismantling the barriers that make resilience a necessity for Black women in the workforce? Because here's the truth: we don't need more think pieces about how strong Black women are. We don't need more panels celebrating our ability to bounce back. We need policy change. We need investment in the sectors where Black women lead and serve. We need accountability from corporations that made DEI commitments and then quietly walked them back. We need safety nets that actually catch us when we fall. And we need to stop asking Black women to be resilient in systems designed to break them. So I'm asking you, what will you do? Will you advocate for policy change in your workplace, in your community, in your voting booth? Will you support Black women owned businesses, not just with your dollars, but with your networks, your mentorship, your platforms? Will you hold corporations accountable when they abandon their commitments to equity? Will you create space, real space, for Black women to rest, to heal, to be soft without having to justify it, without having to earn it? Because here's what Aisha taught me: resilience is beautiful, adaptability is powerful, but neither should be required for survival. And until we dismantle the systems that make them necessary, we are not celebrating Black women. We are abandoning them. This is not just about Black women, this is about all of us. Because when we allow systems to target the most vulnerable, when we celebrate survival instead of demanding justice, we all lose. We lose the brilliance, the leadership, the innovation that comes when people are free to thrive, not just survive. So let's stop celebrating survival and start building a world where Black women can thrive, where softness is not a luxury, but a birthright, where rest is not something we have to fight for, but something we are freely given, where our labor, our leadership, our brilliance are valued not just in words, but in policy, in investment, in structural change. That's the world Aisha Hodge is fighting for. That's the world I'm fighting for. And the question I'm leaving you with today is this: will you fight for it too? Will you move beyond admiration to action? Will you stop applauding our strength and start dismantling what made that strength necessary. Because the truth is, we shouldn't have to be this strong. We shouldn't have to be this resilient. We shouldn't have to rebuild from nothing over and over again. We deserve systems that support us, policies that protect us, workplaces that value us, communities that hold us. And until we have that, none of us are free. So I'm asking you to choose. Choose disruption over comfort. Choose accountability over applause. Choose action over admiration. Because Black women have been surviving long enough. It's time we get to thrive.